Now, I'm not here to impugn anybody or sully reputations, and nasal cavity realignment is not the intent. But I need to address a big fat lie about Australian wild river bass that the experts have been promulgating. The lie involves defining how to find bass. My comrade and I read all of the articles in the fishing magazines and watched all of the videos available. We enjoyed the expert advice of the Adamses, the Baduloviches, the Starlings, the Watsons, the McGoverns, Rays, Magnas, Sylvesters, etc., etc., etc. Basically anybody who has spoken or written about wild river bass, and probably a whole lot who haven't written about it, but anyway. So we osmotically absorbed into our consciousness and our very DNA all of the elements, factors and considerations listed by these venerable folk in relation to the identification of a good wild river bass location. So, what is the criteria that they preach? The criteria for locating an Australian wild river bass location. Make sure it's impossibly hard to get to, even if life insurance wouldn't insure you on this one. Make sure it is hardly ever fished. Well, isn't this just stating the bleeding obvious when point one said kill yourself getting there? Make sure it isn't constantly in drought during bass breeding season. Yep, there's river flotsam up in the rafters. Make sure it has a plentiful food supply for the bass. More bugs on the water than in your tent or an entomologist's handbook. Make sure it has good habitat structure. 10,000 ways you can lose those expensive lures. Peak time is a hot day, very high humidity with the barometer exploding off the wall. Popping paracetamol and ibuprofen as if they were Smarties till your liver and kidneys explode. So we knew precisely what we were looking for. Further extensive research uncovered a location on a river which one of the foremost luminaries of bass fishing expertise described in a legendary book about Australian bass as one of the greatest bass fishing spots in Australia. So we spent 12 months looking for a way in and working out what gear we would need to fish this obscenely remote wilderness spot. The very beginning of the descent into this spot was easy. A doddle, in fact. You can see us vibrating with excitement. Then, of course, it got harder and more painful. So down and down we descended a mini mountain till we came to a jungle-lined ravine and the greatest looking bass spot in Australia. There, before us, were kilometres of beautiful, pristine pools separated by rock-strewn rapids, with water ankle to knee-deep flowing across them. We wasted no time getting the gear sorted and started to stealthily fish the pools. We fished an afternoon through to nightfall and then the next morning till lunchtime. That first afternoon was very hot and humid. The barometric pressure soared as a thunderstorm threatened but didn't quite hit the area. The littoral vegetation was thriving and pulsating with the sound of both bird life and insect life. Working the main pool had an air of wild isolation, being buried deep within this awe-inspiring terrain. The pools were lined abundantly with snags. What are snags? To those who don't fish, there are many forms of habitat structure that, for a bass, represent a place to rest and shelter, or a place to ambush prey or pick off opportunistic falls from the heavens of insect fodder. This place had a plethora of different types of snags. In terms of the wealth of snags within the pools, this was the Fort Knox repository of snags. It was filled with gold. The bass dwell beside, beneath or adjacent to them, and they wait for opportunistic titbits to fall from above or to pass by with the flow along the bank. Also, there are often aquatic crustacea and small fish that will cling to the very edges of the pool and within reeds and beneath crevices of rocks when the environmental conditions are right. There was no shortage of opportunistic food. It was falling from the verdant overhang of trees and shrubs that leant from the banks across from both sides of the pool. A constant buffet of fallen insects and other biting, scurrying, flying and crawling critters was scattered across the top of the water. So we worked furtively and fervently up the pools, casting a wide array of different types of lure to every single snag and potential bass holding feature. We cast, we cast, we cast. And by the way, if you ever try this, don't use a toy type inflatable. Get a kayak like Peter. My inflatable was absolute rubbish for this caper, spinning in circles like a Catherine wheel, sunk so low in it that it made casting really difficult. And the dominant vision is of your friggin' feet, and unless you're a foot model for big money advertising campaigns, you don't want to be staring at them for hours on end. Still, you adjust and adapt, and silently grumble to yourself. Whoa, wasn't that a nice cast? And occasionally you got snagged, and in retrieving your lure, you had to be careful you were not snatched by a lurking velociraptor. The big revelation was that in spite of all of the food falling to the surface, we never saw a solitary fish rise or any form of fish activity while that smorgasbord sat on the surface. If there were fish in the pool, at some time something should definitively have risen to the surface. Absolutely no activity occurred. Nothing was sighted for the entire time we were there. But we fished every nook and cranny, every square millimetre. This dead horse took a savage and relentless beating till the stick was little more than splinters. Perhaps any bass that had been in the pools had evolved into a higher life form. So, wrapped in a shroud of abject failure and consumed by a sense of pitifulness, we still had to face the climb out. There in the background of this frame, the top of that mini mountain can be seen. That was the spot we descended from. That was the spot we now had to climb to. So, in 38-degree heat, the trek out almost wrote off both of us. Climbing that mini mountain with an overburden of gear caused bodies and hearts to dehydrate, pound uncontrollably and struggle. At one point, I felt like simply lying down on the ground and expiring just to get the whole thing over and done with. It was hard not to be filled with an overwhelming feeling of pathos, for we had just been to the best looking bass spot in Australia, which had no bass. But does the scandal stop there? Absolutely not. We were not going to be a cosmic joke. Cosmic pessimism may have set in, but the next day we decided to try somewhere else. And that somewhere else showed us the appalling swindle that had been wrought upon us. It was substantiated as more of a fact than we had at first realised. Hoodwinked into a near-death experience by the experts, we took a path to the alternative nirvana. Okay, to be honest, critics commented that either we didn't have the expertise to entice the bass to bite, or they were shut down. That is, we can't catch bass. Well, Gerard, the very next day we went to the adjacent river, just down the road, literally the river next door. We were not going to be depressed by the demoralising myths of the experts. However, if the first river was the penthouse, which met the experts' criteria of a good wild river bass location, this next spot, comparatively speaking, the very next day we went to was literally the outhouse of streams that was wheezing anemically away in what looked like a near-death state. Why near death? Because of the lack of water and flow, it looks like a beach with a few fetid pools scattered along it, in comparison to the best looking bass spot in Australia. This is a literal artery that was so choked up with sand, a walk between the pools felt like traversing the 100-mile beach. The only arteries in worse shape are those of burger and steak gluttons whose arteries are so hardened you can shatter them with a hammer. It was a spot the blackguards probably wouldn't recommend or steer you towards, or even suggest that it contained bass. Perhaps this is truly one gigantic conspiracy. So, if you can't catch bass in a good-looking, fits-the-bill, pristine spot, that is the penthouse of bass spots, deep-watered and heavily flowing, food and snag rich, jungle-lined ravine almost impenetrable, then how likely are you to catch them in the outhouse of a bass spot, which is dry, squalid and barely flowing, sclerotic and easily walkable? That's right, easily walkable. Which begs the question, what manner of monstrous con is being perpetrated, where here you lazily walk a short distance on flat ground beside a farm fence till you skip lightly down to a pool with bass. No pushing through jungle to the bank as if you're in search of the source of the Nile, or Burke and Wills were your muses. See, you shouldn't be reenacting Werner Herzog's Fitzcarraldo dragging a boat over a mountain in order to get to a bass pool. The most strenuous act should be delicately jumping a farm fence without, I repeat, without needing to carry an EPIRB and a last will and testament in your back pocket in case the wilderness devours you. At this river, after a brief and pleasant saunter adjacent to the farm fence, you then just pop down to the nearest river pool. Okay, the pools might not be pristine, and they were somewhat murky, shallow, uninspiring visually and aesthetically. But what does the pool produce? Why, bass, of course. In pools that meet none of the experts' purest wild river bass criteria. Add a picnic table and you would have the perfect swimming hole for the family. This is bass fishing, when you actually have bass at a spot and you can catch them. So, what lesson did we take from this tale? Well, don't believe these celebrity bass experts who implore you to push yourself to near death in order to descend into a secret bass location. The best bass spots are probably accessible, flogged, and in a tawdry looking state. Though I probably shouldn't mention that, as it will endanger the lives of myself, family and friends. Thus, the conspiracy lives on.